And welcome back to the Coach Show podcast, everybody. You're stuck with Matt and I today. It's just us two. We don't have any guests on today. We kind of planned on possibly having one, but we're just going to go us two. I think it's probably a good time to stop and kind of reflect on some of the guests that we've had so far, talk about some commonalities, and more importantly, I think we're going to talk about skills versus talent today. And it'll be an interesting topic because I know that in the programming industry, in any skilled labor, there's always the argument of like, well, you know, you got lucky to be born with these skills or whatever. So I know you have a personal story with your wife that you want to share, so I'll hand it off to you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we can talk about the other thing like privilege and luck later. But there's a common thing that I do hear a lot when it comes to like the idea of being lucky or like you're just a genius or whatever. And so me and my wife talk about this. My wife worked really hard. So my wife is Korean. She grew up in Korea. Her dad at a young age said, go pick a skill and you're going to get good at it, basically, right? And so she picked art. And she went to an art high school, which they have in Korea. She knew that she wanted to, at some point, she wanted to own her own art academy because academies are really big, like after school education is really big in Korea. So she wanted to own her own art academy. So she worked really hard. And when she was still in high school, she got hired by some owner who said, like, I want to invest in an art academy, but I don't know anything about art. So I'm going to hire this high school person to be the main teacher. So she was good enough that they hired. She won some awards too. You've seen her.
She's very talented.
She's really.
Check out some of her work in the description below.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. So that's why I'm going to talk about skills versus talent, as well as like maybe anyway. So she worked really hard to gain the skills, not the talent, to be good enough to get hired at a high school or like at this academy while she was still in high school. Then she went to college, like an art college, obviously, to continue her education. Eventually, she graduated, and she had like she was smart enough to also realize, like, because I want to run my own academy. She purposely got that job to learn how to run an academy, not just be a teacher, not just be like a really good artist. So then she ended up leaving and starting her own at a pretty young age, relatively. I mean, she was like 22 or whatever, like as soon as she got out of high school. So she started her own academy. She had a bunch of certifications. She had a bunch of certifications. She obviously had like a degree in art, and now she had been managing her own academy. She was able to take all of those students as well because they followed her to her own thing. But then, and so one of the things that she told me as well is she never took a vacation. She didn't party. I mean, it's Korea, so people kind of like there's a drinking culture there, but she didn't go on vacation. She didn't go on parties. And she woke up every day and 7 days a week was just building up her skills. Then at 22, she was able to start her academy. She saved up money for that. I met her when she was like 26 or 27, still had never taken a vacation. And her friends were all saying how lucky she was. And so that's kind of like why we started talking about this, me and her, because she said she would get kind of annoyed because they said, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're your own boss and you know what you want to do," and she was always like, "It's not luck." I mean, of course, I'm sure there was some luck along the way. For a lot of us, there's luck along the way, or like there's some good opportunities along the way. But she made consistently good choices and gained skill, and then it looks like luck at the end.
Right.
And I think that's like it actually reminds me of your story because there probably are people who think, oh, here's this 23-year-old guy. How did he get this 6-figure income? And he's just really lucky. He was born a genius. I wish I was born that way.
It's funny, right, that anytime it seems like anytime people, especially unsuccessful people, look at successful people, they always say, like, you're lucky. Well, they can't all be lucky. There's some element of hard work that was involved in that. But one thing I will say, you and I talked about this a little bit before the podcast this morning, and I think it's an important thing to bring up. I want to be humble. Like when we talk about whether or not, or when we talk about success just in general, I want to be humble, and everybody should be. You should recognize the things that got you where you are. But I think the thing that people miss is they say like, well, you got very fortunate to have, maybe some seed money for your business, or you had, good parents, or you had the ability to go to college, or they paid for you to go to college or whatever. And that is all fair. That's all good stuff. I tell people all the time, I'm not one to take away from the investment that my parents gave me.
Of course,
I give them so much credit.
Yeah.
But I took advantage of what was available to me.
Mm.
And I like I said, I'm an opportunist. And if there's something available to me and I can take advantage of it, you better believe I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that not only goes for like just circumstantial stuff that happens in your life, that's also that like internal talent, right, that you have, and recognizing that you need to take advantage of it. It sounds like your wife is obviously like a very creative, left-brained person, and she took advantage of that, and she took advantage of the fact that she had an opportunity to see how an academy was built so that she could do it herself.
Yeah.
And so she's an opportunist, right, just like me, and so she took advantage of that. I think that that's important, and we shouldn't just focus on like always saying, like these people had all of the things line up perfectly for them, and so I don't know.
Yeah. So the purpose is I'm reading another book by Seth Godin, and it's called The Practice. And the premise of the book is like build skills and don't worry about talent. I don't know if that's the exact premise, but that is a major part of it, because in general we are all talented or good at different stuff. Obviously not. But like we're all born with different levels of
course.
Like I wasn't born over 6 feet, so I'm probably not going to be a basketball player. Actually, when I was also big as a little kid, and everyone said, "Play football. You're a big guy. Play football." Right? So maybe that would have been using my natural gifts or whatever.
Right.
But the purpose, the reason I bring this up is because I was trying to teach my brother programming, and it's hard. He's older than me. He's turning 40 this year, and he doesn't really like where he's at in his career. And so I said, let's go over some programming stuff. And he did it for a little bit, and he just said, like, kind of like, I think that I'm just not smart enough. I told him, no, I go, you're wrong. You are smart enough. Anybody can do this. It's going to take maybe more work if you're like, if you haven't been, if you don't like logic and puzzles and things like that, right? And I feel like with Gregory, the person we had on 2 weeks ago, that was kind of the feeling that I got. Not that maybe he wasn't smart enough, but he might look at somebody like you and think like, oh, he's just really smart, and oh, maybe I can't do this. Now Gregory, I don't think he said that. Greg didn't say that directly, but I worry that a lot of people who get started think that it's too hard and it's just not for them. Right. And I disagree, and that's kind of what this book is about. Like just work on the skills. Trust in the process. That's another thing that he says a lot. Like, and the process is, just wake up and study or whatever. What else did he say? He said something really interesting about like going to the gym. He was like, I mean, people always say this, like getting in shape is really easy, right? Eat less, move more. Like eat less and work out, right?
Yeah.
And that's true. In the end, that is, everyone knows that's what you like. Eat right and work out. But it says the hard thing is doing it every day. The hard thing is finding that hour every single day. And I think that that's true for example, programming as well. I still study all the time. I happen to like studying.
Yeah.
But I think that was a mindset as well. Because as a matter of fact, it is a mindset, because I dropped out of school. Oh, I got my 2-year degree at Green River, and I dropped out. And the reason I dropped out was because I said, I don't like school.
Yeah.
So that is like a complete flip there.
I think you could probably learn to like anything. It's odd, right? That like you have to be motivated. That's what people are gonna say. You have to be motivated to like study every single day and like do a little bit of programming every day. And I kind of wonder why that is. Because like it'll happen to me too sometimes where I'm like, it just. I think you said it in one of the earlier podcasts where you said like your brain just does this thing where it's like, oh, I'm about to exert a bunch of energy, and I just don't know if I want to do that right now. But circling back to what you said about people questioning whether or not they're smart enough, that's just a matter of not understanding what programming actually is, or maybe any skill just in general. When we look at a skill and you see somebody doing the end result, it just looks complicated. You're like, building an app just seems crazy. Especially when you learn a little bit of programming, you're like, dang, there's like so many moving pieces there. And I think that's where your brain goes, dang, this is a bunch of energy that I'm about to exert, like we said. But really, in actuality, what programming is just a bunch of small little pieces that you're just moving together. I guarantee you that if like Gregory and I sit down, or even anybody that doesn't understand programming, I even do it sometimes with Amaya, just practice for myself. I'll show her a problem and I'm like, I want to show you that you and I could both solve this problem. If we broke it down into small enough pieces and we just talk through it algorithmically or whatever, we can kind of get through it. We built you and I built this thing for VShred early on, like an input dial.
Oh, yeah.
And that thing requires some crazy math. You have to calculate arc points and all sorts of weird geometry and whatnot. But anybody can do it. If you look at it from like the high level, you're like, dang, that's a ton of work to get that thing happening. But actually, the math is very simple. And I write it one line at a time. I'm not writing multiple lines at a time. We're writing one line at a time. So I think that's one thing that you have to explain to a new programmer is this job is not like building these huge things all at once. It's just simply one step at a time. And I happened to get really good at that. And as I was learning early on, obviously I took advantage of the fact that I'm a logical person by nature and I like computers. So it worked out for me. I guess in that sense I got lucky. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that's it. Like, when people are getting into it, you just gotta like, yes, you do have to find the motivation like we're talking about, but also just recognize that moving through this thing one piece at a time, just getting started, that's what's ultimately going to get you there. You know what I mean? And like,
So in this book, he also talks about, so he brings up, I question some of this because I know some of the history, but he talks about how some people were trying to study like the differences between like skill levels, basically, right? And so they happened to pick swimming, and they didn't happen to pick it. They liked swimming because, for example, like nobody's born knowing how to swim, right? Nobody's born like a natural swimmer. And of course, there are some variations in body types. Like, obviously, I'm bigger right now, so I'm gonna swim a little bit less than Michael Phelps. I don't know if fat floats more, so maybe I can float better. But and Michael Phelps has these long arms, for example. But he said, in general, there wasn't that much difference in like how much they had practiced, like Olympic athletes versus like country club athletes or whatever. He said the two differences that they found were actual technical skill. So like, do you know the proper way to like turn around underwater or whatever? Do you know the proper way to do the stroke or whatever? So there was a little bit of, or maybe a little bit or a lot of technical skill. And he also said attitude was a big difference. And so we were talking about that as well. I think that attitude is really important. And I also think that attitude is a skill that you can increase immediately, or you can change immediately, even if you don't necessarily like it. Because we were talking about how I do think programming is a skill. I don't think nobody's born knowing how to program. You say that you're more logical, and I don't know how much of a requirement that is, but like you start programming. Somebody who starts programming today, it's going to be a long time before they increase their skill level, right? But your attitude skill, you can come in, because you have like roughly complete control over your attitude. You can come in recognizing that, hey, studying is going to be hard, but if I do this for an hour or two every day, it's going to get me there in 6 months, in a year, or whatever, like 2 years. So like you can change that attitude. And I mean, obviously not really just faking it, because these days I don't just fake it. Like I do, sometimes I'm reading for like an hour or two, some like computer science stuff, and it's like, oh, this is hard, but I want to get to page 200 of this book.
Yeah.
Right. And so it still can be hard, but in general, I do believe that, okay, if I can finish this book, then actually I remember saying this directly, like to my wife years ago. I said, I don't think I'm ever going to be like the smartest programmer. Like, but so I can't guarantee that I can be like the smartest. Maybe there is some intellectual limit. I said, I can't control that though. I can control being like the most well read. Because not everybody wants to read. So I don't know if that's going to help me or not. But if I'm reading operating system concepts, maybe there's some nuggets in there that it just accumulates. So that was the thing that I could control. So that was part of my attitude. So I think that having that good attitude really, really helps.
Yeah. So I think with all of these skills, there's like some artistic element to it, even to programming. One thing that I want to talk about, let me first start this with a question. Do you consider yourself a conversationalist? Just yes or no?
No.
No. Do you think I am?
Yes.
No. If it's anything, it's the opposite.
Okay.
Like we do the podcast, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is I think that I read something the other day. I think I read it after the podcast with Randy. There was something that Randy said that we were talking about. It may have even been after the podcast that kind of sent me into this spiral of just looking into like psychology.
Yeah, I remember him talking about something psychology, but I don't remember exactly what.
He did say, I don't know if it was this, but after the podcast, he had said something about, what was it? He said there's a type of person that will tell you, like, I'm doing this thing later, and like it's them telling you that like
like an asker.
Yeah, an asker versus
like a
what was the other one?
I don't remember, like a declarer.
Yeah. And the basic premise was that like there's one type of person that will say like, "Hey, would you mind taking me to the store later?" versus the other person says, "I need to go to the store at like 6 p.m." Anyways, that's really not that important, but it sent me into this like spiral of kind of looking into some psychological stuff. So, for me, one skill that I'm trying to get better at, and I think, sorry, I'm scattered now. Okay, so the reason I was bringing that up was because there is two types of people, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the thing that Randy brought up, but there's the type of person that's more interested in topics of the conversation, and then there's the other type of person that's more interested in people, the different personalities that they're communicating with. I am for sure topics. I don't really care too much about the person as much as I care about the topic. My wife is a complete opposite. She could care less about what they're talking about. It's really the person. The person is what's interesting to her. And I think that if you're that type of person that's interested in people more than topics, that probably makes you more of a conversationalist. And I think to some extent, maybe you're either born with that or just raised that way. I don't think I was raised that way, nor was I born that way. I care about abstract topics. I like talking about abstract things, and I can even talk to somebody about something that I don't understand, and just listening is really cool to me. I actually think of myself as more of a listener. Selfishly, I think I get more from listening than I do from talking. But this makes me a poor conversation.
Jocko says the same thing, by the way.
Right. And by the way, I'm not saying this to like toot my horn or give advice. That's not what I'm doing at all. I really admire people that can talk. I mean, we need people like that in the world. Surely like the president maybe is an example of somebody that needs to speak well, right?
Yeah.
You don't always need to listen. Sometimes you got to speak well. And some jobs require that. Maybe even in engineering, if you're like a senior engineer, you probably need to be able to communicate well to other people.
Yeah.
But for me personally, I get more from listening. And so when I'm in like social scenarios, sometimes people can be off-put by the fact that I don't talk much. I'm really just like trying to get a feel for everybody. And what people talk about interests me a lot. But again, sometimes people think that that's a little bit off-putting. They're like, wow, this guy's like antisocial or something. And I'm like, oh, I'm actually not. Like this is social to me. Like I just like hearing what you guys have to say. If you ask me, like, you know, what I did yesterday, I don't know. I just don't feel like that brings much value to my life or your life. But I'm realizing that that's not true because not everybody is like me. If my wife asks somebody, what did you do yesterday? It is a positive thing to her to hear that from you. Like she's interested in who you are and learning like about you or whatever. So anyways, I'm bringing this up because with programming, this was like my natural talent, something that I wanted to learn. And I had this like internal built-in ability to do it well and understand it. Another skill that I want to get good at that's more artistic or what left-brained, if you will, is the conversationalist thing. And I think I have a good attitude about it. I'm just terrible at it because I get in the situation and I'm just like, okay, now I'm going to listen. Or if somebody brings up an abstract topic, you'll notice, boom, I'm in. Now we're talking. Because like I want to get your brain, I want to like sometimes the best way to get you to talk about some abstract topic is to give you some food for thought, let's say. So I'll get involved in that. But when it just comes to talking to people in a social scenario, it's just a hard thing for me to get good at because I'm like trying to come up with things that are cool to talk about. You know what I mean?
I don't. Yeah, I do know what you mean.
With the podcast, we're talking about topics.
Yeah.
So this is easy for me to have a conversation about. But and one more thing, and then I want to get your opinion. I said a lot, but the other thing that makes me a poor conversationalist is I'm doing exactly what I just criticized like new engineers of, which is like trying to view the thing from like this high level and try to like see everything at once. And so sometimes in conversation, I'll stutter. I've done it on the podcast, just did it a couple seconds ago, because like my brain is like thinking of like 5 things. What direction do we go? Instead of just chunking it up to one piece and being like, this is the direction that we're going to go. Once we finish that, we'll go over here. That's how you'd engineer a project. You wouldn't try to do everything at once.
Yeah.
But when you're like new and fresh at something and not super good at it, your brain's just trying to piece the whole thing together. You know what I mean? So I'm just trying to bring this up as an example of something that I'm trying to also get better at. Meanwhile, trying to offer criticism of engineering, but I should be taking that same criticism and applying it over here.
Yeah. I think, so I agree with you. I like, at least like bringing it back to this topic. I don't think that some people might be born naturally better communicators, but it is a skill that you can learn. And I think that's the more important thing to focus on.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I wasn't young in high school. Like back when I was in like 14 or something, I was like, even back then I was reading like How to Win Friends and Influence People, and like there was like a lot of books on communication, like verbal and nonverbal. So like there was like a lot of books on lying, like Never Be Lied to Again and stuff like that, right? And so for some reason I was interested in that stuff. So I don't think of myself as a good communicator either. I don't.
You're an effective communicator. I don't know. I think you're a more socialite than me, but if anything, you're really effective at communication. The thing that we may struggle with, but again, I don't think you're nearly as bad at me, is just the like social interaction that's not informative.
But here's the thing, that because I think sometimes it makes me awkward, or it makes me feel awkward, like going to parties and stuff. So I think I'm the same as you. I just got really good at doing this thing, and the thing is just asking questions. And actually, so when I was in, it was interesting because when I was in Korea, I wasn't an English teacher, but I had a friend who was a bar owner, and he was having Koreans come. He had like a special like learn English night, and they would, and he would invite like college age kids to the bar, and they would get like a discount. And then he was asking some of the English teachers to come and like help teach English. And like I was an English teacher, nobody came. It was just me. And so I was trying to teach them conversations, and my rule was just just listen close, and they're gonna say some nugget, and whatever that nugget is, just like keep like. And I used to do this when I was trying to date people. I'm married now, but like this is what I would do when I was trying to date, because I don't know what it's like to be a girl dating, but as a guy, I want to make sure that I'm not like a super handsome guy. I'm kind of overweight too, right? So my only hope was like to try to be interesting, right? So I would try to like make sure the conversation was interesting. So I would, and this is the advice that I told them as well. It's like, you want to speak to somebody in English, so like listen to whatever, like basically like ask them a question and then listen to what they say, and they're gonna give you like maybe just one nugget, but sometimes 2 or 3. Keep all those nuggets in the back of your head. Like ask them, then like once they say something, ask them the top thing on that list, like the one that's most closely related to what they just said, and then keep that going. And if that path stops, pop the next one off of the list, right?
Right.
And so I practice this all the time. So I practice it in a weird way, like not the dating part anymore, but I still do this because, like when I go on an Uber drive, it's awkward. Sometimes it's awkward to me because it's just quiet. And I don't know why. It feels like they want to have a conversation. I think Uber drivers are actually good at this as well, right? Because they want to talk. But sometimes it feels awkward to me. So then I'll just start up a conversation. My wife says, you can have a conversation with anybody. I was talking with a guy, I forget what. He was talking about investing, which I'm not an expert. I don't really know much about it. Anyway, but like we were just talking about just random stuff. And she says like, how is it that you have these conversations with these Uber drivers? And I go, I don't know. I just keep asking them questions. So I think that's the skill.
For me, if there is a topic, we're good. Like we're solid. We can go from there. But like this, like meeting somebody for the first time and not basing the conversation on a topic is what's hard. It's like you and I just met. Hey Matt, nice to meet you. What do you do? What's your hobby? Like, and then you might tell me, and then you might ask me, what's your hobby? And I'm just like, well, this is where this conversation's not very interesting anymore. Like, it doesn't feel like it to me. It doesn't feel like this is bringing any value to either one of us.
Super easy. What's your hobby?
Me?
Yeah.
Programming.
Oh, well, that's an easy one. I thought you were going to say like beekeeping or something.
Beekeeping?
Oh, I don't know anything about that. Tell me about that.
Oh, you wanted me to come up with a fake one?
It doesn't have to be, but yeah, programming. But like, it could be programming.
Clay pottery.
Oh, I don't know anything about that. Tell me about that.
Yeah, but see, this doesn't. I just don't feel like I don't understand
I'm just saying that's how you can. That's how you don't have to do it, and that's the attitude portion, right?
Yeah.
That we were going back to. You don't have to do it, but if the thing that you're trying to do is to avoid the awkwardness of like whatever that social awkwardness feeling is, oh yeah, I'll just ask you. Right?
Well, so what I've observed is that people that are good at like being social or whatever, there's this like obvious layer of confidence that they have. And it's like you think that everybody here cares about what you're talking about. And because of that, they do care, right? Like when somebody's like, you know, if I ask you about clay pottery and you're like, oh man, I do, it's so cool. Like I do this thing where I've got this, you know, fire and it, you know, when I do this, like you're all excited.
That must be hot. That's what I would say to somebody who did clay pottery. Oh wow, that must be hot. You get burned a lot?
I guess. I'm just listening and I'm just like, I don't know. It's just, and I probably need to do the same thing when I come into conversations. There is some interesting things about me, I suppose. And again, this is all about recognizing that everybody's not like you. Everybody's not a topic-based conversationalist like me. Some people are really genuinely interested in the person that's in front of them. My wife, that's why I think she's so sweet when she meets new people. And I think it's why she's going to be a good nurse when she does become one. Because she genuinely cares about the person that she's interacting with, where I care about what's up here for you. Like, I'm really curious what's inside your brain, like, in terms of knowledge. But, like, who you are is just not nearly as important to me as it is to my wife. But it makes her an amazing human being. And she's way funner to talk to than me, trust me.
Yeah.
Because I can't do anything. She'll make you feel, like, flattered, I guess. Like, you know, she'll be like... And so is Curtis, my buddy Curtis. He's the same way. I can talk to that guy all day long, and every time I walk away, I feel really good having talked to him.
He's a good guy.
Because he'll just make you feel like I've seen him, you know, come to, or he's come over to the house maybe, and Amaya's, you know, opening a box or something that's actually happened the other night, and it's like some makeup. And if I come over to somebody's house and opening a box of makeup, I know nothing about makeup. I don't care about makeup. It's not important to me. So I'm just like, oh, okay, that's cool. What are we going to talk about now? But Curtis is like, oh, what is it? Like, what'd you buy? Like, what is this for?
Nice.
This is super cool. Like, this is going to look really good on you. Do you plan on wearing it to this event? You know, we're going to this show coming up or this dinner. Are you going to wear it?
That's really good. I don't do that.
And
that's really good.
And he's just so good. And Amaya's the same way. She can do that with people. And you feel like special. Like, you feel like this person, you know, is making me feel important, you know?
One of the I guess, compliments I heard about Bill Clinton back in the day was you can go, like, you'll go to a party, or Bill Clinton will go to a party and everyone will leave feeling like they just met their best friend.
Right.
Like he was just so, like, you know, like, I'm sure like lots of business people and politicians are trying to be like that as well. Like I think he had like a big Rolodex of names. He always remembered people's first names, and he would just be so engaged in the conversation with you that you would feel like you just met like your long lost best friend or something like that. And like that, I do believe that is a skill. I don't think I'm as good as Curtis either.
Yeah, Curtis is Bill Clinton, then. That is how that guy is. Like, you feel like you just met your best friend. Everybody calls him like just the best hype man, because you just like, you could tell him anything. Like, the The problem is if somebody comes to me and they're like, "Oh, dude, I just got this raise at work or whatever." I'm like, "Oh, dude, congrats. Like that's really cool. Good for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations." Curtis is just like, "Dude, that is going to like advance you to the next level. Like how are you going to apply that to like where you go?" And you're just like, "You're so good. Like how do you do that?" Cuz like I would just feel like a dork if I did that. I would feel like people would. The other thing is I feel like I would come off as disingenuous. And so I'm trying to like nurture that thing on the topic of like nature versus nurture. I'm trying to nurture that and get better at it. I don't want to come off as disingenuous because
of course not.
Curtis not only comes off.
He doesn't seem fake at all.
He doesn't come off as disingenuous, and the dude is 100% genuine. And it's crazy because I feel like that's the part that I lack there is like he actually cares, which makes it easier to act like he cares or to come off that way because he does.
He does. Yeah,
versus me, like I said, I'm super interested in the topic, and that will show if we talk about artificial intelligence or something. You're going to tell that I care about this topic, obviously. But if you're telling me something about yourself that's personal, it's not that I'm not happy for you. I'm not a jerk. I don't care the way that he does. Like that's important to him. That releases serotonin or something that makes him happy to hear that this. I don't know.
When we were in a band, we were never really big, right? But like, of course, you're still trying to like. You'd always play shows. Like you'd schedule a show at a bar, and there'd be like 3 or 4 other bands that you're gonna play with, right? And so usually we would play first. Well, because we were like just really small, right? So, but we're always trying to network with these other bands, and sometimes we played with some really bad bands. Like I don't think that we were that great, but we played with some people who really just weren't good. So, but I wanted to network with these people. So one of the things that, and I do think that being genuine is really important. And so I would do that. Like, oh, this person, I didn't think they were that great. So I would really think, okay, what was that one nugget that I can be honest about? What's that one, which I think is important for that. Yeah, because I agree. You don't want to come off as like not, like you don't want to lie. I don't want to lie for me personally, but I also don't want to come off as like, oh, Matt's just like a flatterer or like he's just fake, right? So at the very least, I look for that nugget of like, what's this thing I could be honest about? And so I would actually be honest, like, beekeeper, don't you get stung a lot?
Yeah.
That seems super scary. Doesn't that hurt? Oh, clay pottery? Is that hot? You get burnt?
So I'm going to bring this back into programming here in a second, but I think there's this thing, because I can tie this into programming too. When it comes to conversation, the thing is, there is the concern of coming off as disingenuous, but I think that comes from a feeling of like doubt about yourself. And that doubt is crippling.
Yeah.
And it can be for programming too. So like, for example, maybe growing up when I had conversation, like I wasn't a popular kid. I was lucky in high school to have run around with a few popular kids, but I don't think I was popular myself. If anything, people knew me because my buddy was popular and people thought he was my biological brother. So it like made me able to hang out with the cool kids. But
was his name? Oh, I ruined my joke. Was his name James Cole? It wasn't funny. I'm sorry.
But anyways, I think that there was just a lot of times in high school, when I'm learning myself, where I'll say something to somebody and they won't receive it the way that I intended. And when that happens enough times, you just doubt.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put myself out there again and then get that rejection that sucks. And I think the same thing can happen in programming where somebody says, well, I'm not smart enough. And I think that probably comes from doubt or like rejection, or you've done enough logical things that you failed at, or you maybe just in general, you've tried enough skills that you failed at. And so it's like, well, I can't, what are the chances that if I do it again, it's going to be effective, right? And that can be crippling. But I think that whether it's conversation or programming, there's a strategy, and I'm trying to learn it. I'm still young. I'm trying to figure it out with the conversation thing. I'm trying to figure it out with art in general, by the way. It's not even just conversation. Just the left side of my brain is not nearly as active as the right side of my brain. And it bothers me. Like, I want to get better at it. I want to get better at design in technology. I'm terrible at it. I want to get better there. Just artistic stuff in general. I, by the way, think painting is super, super cool. I'm just not. I wish I could do it because
Yeah. I
it
can't
to
do
me
at
it
all.
seems awesome. Like I would feel super good if I could paint what like your wife paints, for example. So I want to like nurture those things, and there's got to be a strategy to do that. And when I learn that strategy, I will have better advice for people
So
that doubt themselves in programming. I just happen to be good at that thing, so I don't have to nurture that as much.
so there's a guy. So in this book, the practice, he basically says like do the practice, ignore the outcome. And I used to give this advice to my students, but there was also there's a football coach named Bill Walsh. Do you know?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. He wrote a book called "The Score Takes Care of Itself," and his whole thing. I don't know. The problem is I've heard a lot about him, but I didn't read his book. But he basically took like a really horrible team, and then they ended up winning the Super Bowl or like some championship or some Super Bowl. Like
What is the book called?
the score takes care of itself. And they basically like he focused on he was like he started out, it's very famous, it's like he started out, team, this is a football, like these are the laces, and he was teaching them the process. So like they would run, like their 10-yard sprints, and they would just focus on the process. And like the next head coach, he ended up getting fired. Bill Walsh fired him because he said like we need to fire Bill Walsh. He doesn't even care about winning, right? And then so he fired me. He's like, yeah, that's true, but like you were too honest, because he said to his team, like, at this point they're so bad, we can't have dreams of winning the Super Bowl. But they ended up winning like 2 years after he started, but like nobody thought they could win like 18 months in or something like that. 2 years after they started, but it was because he said like, okay, we're not going to care about winning. We're not going to care about the score. We're going to care about the process of running the plays perfectly, like, inch, like down to the inch perfectly. Like we're going to learn how to catch. We're going to learn how to eat right. We're going to learn how to make sure that we're lifting weights. So I think, and so he says that in this book, don't worry about the outcome. And actually I used to tell my students, because everywhere in every college, people are worried about this, but I think it's maybe even a little bit more in Korea, where the students, they only care about the grades.
Right.
You need that high GPA. And so I said, okay. And actually, I would have students come to me after the semester's over, and they would have like a D, and but I need a B, and I go, but you didn't, like, whatever, we can't change that. So what I would tell them is, I said, don't worry about your grade. Focus on learning the material. Focus on doing the homework. Focus on doing the readings. Ask me questions. If you focus on learning this thing, you'll get the good grade. If you just focus on getting the good grade, I mean, it's backwards, right? I mean, you should have a goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, that's what I think it is true about anything with learning. I guess exercise as well, right? If I go to the gym tomorrow, actually, I rode my bike 14 hours one time, and I gained like 5 pounds. 14 hours in one day, because I rode from Daegu to Busan. It was like a big, and I ended up gaining some weight, whereas my buddy lost 5 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. So like the point is, if I go to the gym today, I probably didn't get noticeably stronger, or noticeable, like the scale probably didn't change. Right. But if I go to the gym every day, if I'm not focused on the outcome totally, I'm gonna get that outcome. If I'm running every day and eating right, 6 months from now, a year from now, I'm gonna be in shape. That's how it's gonna be, and I think that's true for learning as well. Do the work, do the reading, focus on trying to learn this thing. It's gonna be hard, right? So don't worry about the outcome. Today, your program might not work. Or actually, even with Korean, it was the same kind of thing. I never noticed myself getting good at Korean. I just studied every day. Every now and then, I would meet somebody who I hadn't met in a couple of months, and they'd be like, "Oh wow, you really improved." And it doesn't feel like I'm improving, because I learned this piece of grammar, and then, okay, now I've learned that, so I'm learning the next hard one. And so it never feels like I'm improving.
Right.
But people who didn't see me all the time would notice every couple of months. So I think that is that, like, just trust in the process of whatever it is, studying or whatever. Do that. Don't be as worried about the outcome, because I think the outcome is what makes people quit.
Yeah.
Like when the outcome isn't successful. Also, it's hard, like dieting. People like cheesecake.
Yeah. I think I might try to, in some way, try to compress that like statement into a title for this video because I actually really like that. I've actually never heard that said like I don't remember the exact quote, but you said like practice and ignore the outcome, basically. It was something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
That's a really excellent thing because I think it sort of highlights why so many people have a really hard time learning a new skill because they're terrified of a poor outcome.
Yeah.
Like there's several things we can tie it to, but
we can tie it to just get started. Like that's everybody else's advice that we've had. Just get started. The reason is really what that is. Like Randy said it, and that's why we started the podcast. We knew it was going to be trash.
Yeah.
And Randy says like your first game is going to be trash. Just get started.
And we ignored the outcome for the first few episodes, and to some extent we're still ignoring things that are not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm still not in love with everything about the way that it's set up, but we did just ignore the outcome and we kept going.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I grew up around a lot of competitive shooters. My dad's he was in the Marine Corps. He's a sharpshooter in the Marine Corps, which is like the highest level that you can achieve.
Is sharpshooter different than sniper?
Yeah, well,
but they can be related, I guess.
Yeah, well, so in all branches of the military, they'll have like rifle marks. I forget all of the different certifications, but I think it's like rifle marksman, rifle sharpshooter. Maybe there's one more. I think there's like 3 levels or something like that. And then there's same thing for handgun. My dad was sharpshooter at both. And my dad also taught for a while.
That's awesome.
He taught Marines how to shoot. Yeah, it's super cool. And the one thing that every single Marine and every single person that's new to shooting will do is they'll see somebody do it that's just excellent. And like the goal in shooting is to get a tight grouping. You want to have a really small. And like my dad, growing up with him is terrible because he would take us shooting, and the guy is just nailing it, in a $0.50 sized hole,
like Deadshot from that scene in Suicide Squad where he's shooting the same hole.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like you're like, Dad, you just missed. No, the bullet just went through the same hole. Like he's just excellent. But the problem is that when you come into this, you're like, well, I'm gonna do that, and you're like focusing so hard on getting your muscles to sit still and like hit the same hole, and your form is all wrong, your technique is all wrong. And in the beginning, you have to ignore the outcome. The first day you go shooting, you're not hitting $50. You're hitting you might miss the man completely. Like it's just is what it is.
I assume I wouldn't do that well.
But you have to get comfortable with this gun, and you have to get comfortable holding it, and you have to get comfortable with the fact that, hey, I'm going to miss. And if I ignore that part, I can get better about just trying to get more comfortable holding this thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, the same thing goes with conversation or programming or whatever. If you're terrified of failing, then you're never going to get anywhere.
In this book, he also Seth Godin. Again, Seth Godin's the author of Linchpin. He's written a bunch of them, Purple Cow and like something about leadership. I talk about him a lot on the podcast. He also says he used to teach people how to juggle, and he would said the problem with juggling, because juggling can be hard. The problem with juggling is the catching. And it's like, you'll start juggling and like if you can do it like me, I can do like a couple, like maybe 10 individual jugs, like 10 tosses and 10 catches, and then I do end up messing up as well because like you'll throw one, and I'm like self-taught, I'm not good, but you'll throw one and it's like a bad throw, and you'll reach out and catch it, and you might catch that one, but now you're like out of position for the next throw.
Yeah.
So what he says is when he teaches people how to juggle, they don't worry about the catching. They practice throwing. It's like throw and let it drop.
Yeah.
Throw and let it drop. And then eventually you'll do 2 and like throw, let it drop.
This is so funny you say that because I've been trying to teach myself to juggle. Ironic. Did you know that?
No.
You didn't know that? I don't know why. I've been trying to. I always, growing up, I thought juggling was super cool.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to do it. You could ask her about it. I'm a dork. She's like, "Can you please come to bed? What are you doing downstairs?" Like, are you a
like
clown?
Some nice beanbag? Like some. What do you got?
I was doing it with avocados the other night, and I just trashed some avocados, like just trying to get good. But I actually, I was getting good at it, and I was getting to the point where I could do it like maybe 8 or 9 times. And it's funny you say what you just said because I looked it up. I was like, what's like a good learning technique to get better at it? Because I'm having a hard time getting past this like 8th or 9th one. And the guy basically said like, even if it's your second one, like the most annoying thing is stopping and resetting.
Yeah.
But he's like, if you're at the second or third one and you feel yourself like moving forward, you should be able to stand still and do it.
Yeah.
If you feel your arms moving out or whatever, just stop, catch them, and reset and start over. And and it's funny he said that because that same thing happened as I was a kid growing up learning to shoot. That my dad would get irritated with us because you'd be holding the gun or whatever and you start shooting and you'd start to go off. And you would just want to just shoot the rest. Maybe I can get the rest of them in or whatever. I don't know. And he'd just be like, stop, put it down, take a step back, breathe, come back to it, approach it with a good form, and let's start over.
Oh, nice.
And so the same thing, obviously you're upset, especially if you're shooting. I mean, this goes for like a bunch of different things, whether it's juggling and trying to get your count up or shooting and trying to get further through the magazine or whatever. Like, you want to like try to recover from whatever failure you're midstream in, but like, really that's the worst way to do it because you're trying to compensate for the failure. You're trying to like you're upset that you just messed up. You're upset when you're juggling that you're moving forward and that's not what you're supposed to do. You're upset that you're 3 rounds in and
so you're trying to
compensate and you're trying to recover, and it's like the worst thing that you can do because you're showing yourself that you're caring about the outcome. And if you're a new shooter, a new juggler, like obviously you're not going to get it perfect. So just stop and pause and breathe. And, we give this advice to programmers all the time in different forms, like, just like finish a project, for example, is a good one because that will force you to hit roadblocks. I think the underlying like sentiment when you tell somebody finish a project, it's not finish a project just to finish a project. That is rewarding.
Don't just quit when it gets hard.
Exactly.
Push through those roadblocks.
Because it's going to get hard. You're going to hit that point. And, we encourage programmers also to encounter problems and just don't move on until you figure it out. I've heard a bunch of senior programmers tell people that. Just keep going. Don't move past that struggle. Because, I don't know, like I've also seen new programmers, including myself, you'll find this little roadblock over here and then you're like, well, I don't know really that much about this new thing, so I'm going to go over here and write this feature that's full of things that I do know. And you feel like you're compensating for not knowing that one thing, and really it's the worst thing you could do. So it's funny. Whoa. It's funny because we're always like trying to give advice to new programmers and stuff, and we don't often do much reflection on the podcast. But for me, this is going to be cool because, like I said, the one thing that I want to get better at is just being a social conversationalist. And so I'm going to take this advice and not worry about the outcome. Probably I'm going to say something that's not relevant to a conversation and I'll get the rejection. But, I mean, it's all part of learning. Like,
There's a book by Leigh Louds, I believe. There's a book called How to Talk to Anyone. She wrote, like,
you need to read that.
Yeah. I read, like, I used to read a ton of, I had a whole drawer full of psychology books, like, not textbooks. Like, actually, there's a book called Psychology. It's called Persuasion. The Psychology of Persuasion or something like that. Probably a better title. But, yeah, like, there's another book called How to Talk to Anyone. And then I think there's another book by her, like 92 ways of something like that. But I used to read all of this stuff. I don't know why I read it. I just thought the psychology stuff was interesting.
It's good. I mean, it's good. It'll get you places. Like, there's no doubt that being good with talking to people is going to get you places.
Yeah.
I'm good with talking to people if it's, again, about a topic. It's so funny to me, though, isn't it, that, like, you have a skill that like you're really good at and you recognize how you got good at that, and like you'll even give others advice about it, and you'll be like, oh yeah, you should in programming you should just finish a feature. If you get a bug, move past it, whatever. But then like your brain doesn't default to doing the same thing for the skills that you're not good at. You're doing the same thing that these people that you're criticizing of, you're doing the same thing over here. But like for some reason you're not like drawing that parallel.
I think it is that like you got to stop and do the reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah, which that's one of the benefits of doing the podcast is we've done it more than once where we've had episodes where we're like hashing stuff out, we're figuring stuff out about how we should do the podcast or about how we can get better. We do it on the podcast because we're sitting here reflecting.
Yeah, I mean, after all, the main we talk about programming, but I feel like the number one thing that we talk about is just like how to learn, how to improve yourself, whatever, and just through talking it out, like it seems like I always walk away from every episode with like some light bulb. For me, I'm gonna walk away. When you said the thing, I know it, but sometimes when words are put in a certain order,
Absolutely.
they click,
Yeah.
and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That makes sense. And you saying like practice and ignore the outcome.
Mm.
I've given that same advice using different words to other people, and people have said the same thing to me, but it's never been as profound as when they are like put just in that order. And again, like I can think of 100 different things that I want to be better at that I'm not doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
So
yeah.
conversation being one of them,
Mm.
non-topic based conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I should do that too. I think
What's something that you're trying to, is there anything that you're trying to get better at that's, maybe even artistic, maybe not? Surely you have a skill other than programming that you're trying to nurture.
I mean, I think communication and leadership. I like I don't know what it was. Like I'm always reading like in my free time these books that I'm listening to are like follow the same pattern about just like personal development and things like that. Like I said, even when I was younger, I was reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. And so I guess that. And so I think that's why like the uh Jocko books like resonated with me so much because I don't consider myself a leader. I'm not. I don't think a leader has to be just like the person who's in charge and like yelling orders at people, which Jocko doesn't recommend. Those aren't like Jocko's words, but that is one of the things where I recognize that. Just like you said, it's probably a good life skill to be a better communicator and to be better at leadership in general. And it's
Yeah.
like I don't know when there's going to be a situation where like something at work or something in life where it's like, oh man, I can't effectively communicate this thing. I guess I mean really that's a job interview right there, right? Like if you're not good at communication, like that can make or break even possibly even if you're a really good programmer, the communication can make or break like if you get a job or not. And so I guess at some level I always knew that those skills were important. And I can't think of that's the thing is I can't think of situations where I purposely use these skills, but by doing it, hopefully like just naturally you get better at these things. So I guess that's it. It's hard to say why I care about leadership because I'm not trying to be manager of something or another. But
I think leadership comes in different forms.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think one thing that makes you a good leader, and like, even at VShred, um, you were in a leadership role, I guess, in terms of dictating like where the Android app was
yeah,
going. And I think the thing that makes you a good leader there is you come very well versed and well educated to a topic. And if you don't know the topic, you're going to, I need to do some research. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that's going to make you effective because we've all worked with a leader where they don't do that and their leadership style is just like, well, if I'm not taking charge, then I'm not leading.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And like that's obviously super poor leadership.
Yeah.
I think obviously with leadership comes a lot of parallels to just collaboration, communication in
Yeah,
general,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you're obviously like really big on that. You
Yeah.
obviously care a lot about that, and as you should. Communication is obviously how we're going to get more out of everybody else, get more out of life, get more out of business or whatever. So one thing that I've been trying to do, I think you're maybe better at it than me. You're definitely better at it than me. But I've been practicing with, like I said, is just talking to Amaya and like, like if I've got something really difficult going on at work or like I'm having a really hard time explaining something to somebody, especially if they're a programmer, I guess I just have really high expectations or not high expectations. I always assume that the way that I'm explaining something is going to make sense to them because it makes sense to me.
Oh yeah.
And that's obviously poor communication. That's not good. And a lot of that is because I work with other programmers, so I'm assuming that they know the same thing, at least about programming, that I do,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is not always the case. So one little fun experiment that I like to do is just at night in bed, I'll have this thing that I struggled communicating with somebody, and I'll just be like, will you just listen to me and just see if you get the general idea? And it's funny because what Amaya will do, her way of like letting me know whether or not I was good at it is she'll try to like create some comparison or analogy to some other thing.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
So like, the other day I was kind of explaining Laravel, like what is Laravel or something like that. Or what is backend, I think was the topic. Like what is it? What does a backend application mean? And what did she say? She said something about, she compared it to like a hospital or something. And she was like, so she's like, basically, like, your front end, like your web is like, that's the thing that's like communicating with the patient. Like, that's the nurse. That's the way that they're like communicating whatever they need to the patient, like what their sickness is, how we're going to treat it, yada yada yada. And then like the back end is like all of the stuff that like the patient doesn't see, that's kind of going on in the background. It's like kind of all the workers that are making this thing possible, getting the medicine to the patient, and this and that. Anyways, I can't remember, she said it better than I did, but it was like, it let me know that like, yeah, I gave, like, I basically helped you understand. Like, I did a decent job at communicating it. That was a bad example, but I've done several where there was one where I was trying to explain memory management to her, and that one was solid. Like, I felt like she really got it after I explained it. Like, it really made sense to her, because she said something about how like, oh yeah, so like if you have this piece of data and it's linked to this one, and like you don't need this one anymore, you don't want it hanging around, like you want it to go away, we don't need that anymore, or something like that. And it was cool. It let me know that like I did a good job. So that's like my way of practicing. I think you're really good at it. You are very elaborate when you explain things, and I think you give a lot of detail.
I think that came from being a teacher.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because it was like, obviously, like I'm explaining computer science topics to people who don't know the computer science yet because they're just freshmen or whatever, right? And sometimes it's hard to explain computer science topics without using other computer science topics. And
right.
Like, oh, I don't know that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think, and I did that for 7 years. I certainly wasn't great at it. I came up with a lot of analogies because people wouldn't understand. I go, okay, well, how else can I explain it? Okay, I'll do it again. I'll do it again. I'll do it again. So 7 years of doing that.
One thing that you do too that I think makes you good at communicating, and I'm trying to get better at it too, is when you explain some especially abstract or detailed topic, you are good at giving context. I've noticed that about you, or like an example of why this matters, or how this applies to this thing. Sometimes I struggle with that. I struggle with like I'm too focused on the actual problem that we're solving to kind of come up with like an example of why this matters or whatever. But I've been practicing that too, because Patrick, who was, we need to get him back on soon, because he's been doing iOS programming, which, by the way, shout out to him, just fantastic. The dude's been picking it up like crazy. And to practice, one thing that I've been doing is I'll say like, okay, Patrick, you're going to do, like I think one of his first tasks was converting the architecture to like a more MVVM versus what we were using, like an MVP style pattern. And he was like, well, why are we doing this? Like, why does this matter? And so instead of like jumping into the actual code that he's writing, I'm like, let's come up with an example. Let's write one together and let's like create like a playground, and we'll like we'll kind of talk through it. And then once we get through that, it's like, okay, so I get it, but it's effectively doing the same thing as MVP. So why do we use this over that? And I'm like, well, let's talk about testing. Let's like actually write some tests, and like this might, help you understand why we're using it for our application. And then like right now he's doing like some dependency injection stuff, and that was also like, he's like, well, it just works right now. Like, why do we need? So then like, it's all going back to tests. And so we're like, I'm trying to give him examples and stuff, because at first, when he first started, it was more just like, well, you should do it because of X, Y, and Z. And he's like, okay, I'll do it. But like, what does that mean? Yeah. We got to break it down into something smaller. Again, something that I think you're really good at, and something that, I need to work on. So
that definitely came from being a teacher. Because I don't know.
And your patience.
That also, well, maybe I was patient before. The weird thing about being a college student is college students are the only people who pay for stuff. I used to say this to my students. College people are the only people who pay for stuff and are happy when they don't get it. So you're paying for class. You're paying for education. But if I come to class today and I say, no class, everyone leaves, like I get cheers, right? And so yeah, the weird thing was, I'm explaining this thing to them that is obviously important. I say obviously because I'm the teacher, right? So obviously, if I'm saying it, it must be super important. You're probably going to laugh because you had teachers where you just disagreed with. So the whole and I've also had bad teachers before as well. So obviously, it's not obvious, right? So I would explain something and say, like, why are we learning pointers? Like, so I can't just start out doing here's what a pointer is, because they're already bored, because it's like, why, this is stupid, why do I need this? That was the question. Actually, I had a student my first semester, he was a sophomore student. I started teaching something, and he was like, I thought he said it in a rude way, but I didn't get mad. I got shocked and embarrassed, and he was like, I don't know what he said. Like, he didn't say this seems dumb, but like, this seems unnecessary. Why are we learning this?
This was me, by the way.
Yeah, maybe.
I
right?
was terrible.
And
I was
that's
an awful student.
And that's no.
Still am.
That's fair. I think that's perfectly fair, because part of the teacher's job, like, first of all, you're paying for it, and so unfortunately you don't know what you need to know. But as a teacher, I got super comfortable with that question. You should be able to ask me, why do I need this thing?
Sure.
And I better have an answer. If I do not have an answer, it's a dumb class, right? And so I started explaining why we're going to learn this thing. Like, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? What's actually the problem that we want to solve? That came first. I realized that needs to come first.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, well, first off, the reason you're learning this thing is because you're a CS student, so you need to learn some computer science, so that's why we want to learn pointers. Now, more specifically, what's the problem that we're going to solve? Like this one, there's always that behind one. If you don't want to learn computer science or you don't like programming, you're in the wrong course. So get out of here. But assuming that that's true, there is a problem. We're going to run into this situation. Here's the situation that we're trying to solve. Here's this new tool. But as a teacher, you should be able to explain that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I need to that would probably be the final thing that would help me complete, or not complete, but probably help kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, kind of help the junior devs or Patrick, like, understand the bigger picture. Maybe what we should do, and it may be good practice for me too, to make sure that I understand why we're doing all the things that we're doing, to say, like, well, if I tell you that this is better for writing tests and I kind of show you an example, well, let's write tests for what we have now. Is that problematic? Yeah. Is it taking more time? Is it too much code? Is it, like,
are they effective tests?
Are they effective tests? Like, are we getting better coverage, or like, do we feel like the coverage is more complete if we do it this way? Maybe I should do that with him, because I feel like oftentimes I'll do a bunch of research, and I think I have a really good understanding of it. I'm rarely making decisions that I don't think are based on good data, but yeah, like, maybe it'd be good practice for both of us to, like, make sure that, the research matches the actual outcome that we're expecting. Like, are we actually going to get out of this what we want? And I think that it's like we always say for any programmer, you have to understand or appreciate the problem to understand the solution.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so probably need to do more of that with Patrick. But yeah, I'm really excited to bring him on. Like, the dude has really come a long way.
It's only been maybe 3 months. How long has it been? 4 months since we had him on? We've almost been doing this podcast 6 months now, by the way. Almost 6 months. This is episode
4.
This is episode 24.
Yeah, we're over halfway. No, we're not.
No, 26 will be.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. 26 will be. You're correct. Yeah. I think so Patrick learned really quickly by just kind of being on the job, probably a whole lot faster. And, like, we always say that, but I'm not sure that we understand why. But I think this episode kind of highlights why. When you have to work on an actual application, failure is, like, just not an option.
Yeah.
Well, like,
you can't just put that on the back burner.
Right.
Like, you have a ticket. What did you do yesterday to get this ticket closer to being done?
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say failure is not an option. Failure in a production environment is obviously not an option, but avoiding failure is not an option. I guess that's the more important thing. Like, if you have to write this feature, you're getting paid to write that feature.
You'd better do it. If you're not doing it, like,
you're gonna get fired. So I think that's why people learn so quickly. Like, I think a lot of people say that, like, oh, well, you'll just learn faster, and that's probably because you are seeing a real world application. That's probably true, but I'm pretty sure the bigger thing there was a ton of stuff at VShred when we started that I had never done before, and it probably wouldn't have been things that I might have just gone and learned by myself.
Oh, yeah.
But just being forced to do them and doing the right implementation, and it works perfectly the first time, I mean, that's a very quick way to learn.
Yeah.
You have no choice but to get it right. So I think that's why Patrick's been doing so good. And he's been working on some pretty intense stuff that most junior devs don't, but he hasn't shied away from it. Like, usually when I put him on something, he's pretty gung-ho about it.
He's a good guy. He's really good.
He's really awesome. He's got a great work ethic and super determined guy. The thing that he wants to get better at right now is UI work. He feels like he's not getting enough UI work at the moment. He's doing a lot of, like, architectural and refactoring stuff. But we're kind of in a weird phase right now where we don't have a lot of new designs coming in. That's going to be changing really soon, and he's going to have an opportunity to do that. But I like where the dude's brain is at. He's just like, he's learning all this stuff right now, but he's already thinking about the things that he wants to be better at and the things that he wants to focus on. He's definitely not shying away from them. So that guy has a fantastic attitude. And he always says that like he thinks that I'm really good at learning. He thinks that I'm like some superhuman but I think he's starting to see.
You should listen to this episode. It's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
People think that this person's a genius or super talented when maybe it's just like accrued skills. One of the skills that you have is learning how to learn. Like you learned how to learn.
Let's put it this way. With programming, I went into it with an aggressively positive attitude.
That's a good quote.
Super excited about it. Like, I know that I'm going to be good at this.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, I don't think that I have anything that anybody else doesn't have in terms of like biology.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just a human being. I'm not like super.
Because it's learnable, and I think that's where that attitude is important too. You had the attitude of this is learnable. There are people who have learned it.
Yep.
Becoming the next Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or whatever, doing that thing, that's maybe harder to learn. But there's millions of programmers. Oh, people learn how to program. Okay, I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. And again, like I'm going into
positive. I love that.
Yeah, I went into it aggressively positive. Like I'm gonna do good at this. I'm gonna see it through. Whatever. Like in my mind, there was no other option, and I was excited about it.
Yeah.
And so the failure part was like, I think I had enough situations early on where I was working on something and I didn't know it and I failed in the beginning, but I just kept pushing through it and I just didn't really consider the failure. It was just like, yeah.
Because you didn't worry about the outcome.
Yeah. And I had talked to enough people and heard enough YouTubers to know that like this is part of the development process.
Yeah.
Both the literal development and the personal development. It's part of the process. So I didn't really like, it wasn't a negative to me. It wasn't like, there was nothing bad about it. It was just part of the process.
It is, yeah.
And so now, when I learn something new, I think Patrick thinks I learn so quickly just because I'm like, you know, I got really good at Laravel at my current job. And whenever I saw the opportunity to learn it, I'm like, boom, pounce on that. Not worried about failing. Let's just jump in and start writing code. I know that I'm going to be terrible in the beginning. I know that I'm not going to do all the right stuff.
Yeah.
I know that I'm going to break things. But whatever.
You know there's going to be questions, and luckily there's people there that you can ask.
Yeah, and I know I've had enough experiences in the past to know that I'll just work through the failure. Every time that I've gotten into some piece of work that I'm like feeling down about and I'm like, I just can't figure this out, I always get through it. Like I've never had something that I worked on that I just bailed on.
Yeah. I've been that way too. There's no way I can solve this. Oh, I solved it.
Yeah. It's like, it's funny because like people at work, you know, they say like this all the time, like, oh, this makes no sense. I don't understand. This is like, this isn't logical. Like this is, got it. I see what the problem is now. But you have enough of those experiences and then you just don't sweat them anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
I had an experience yesterday. I was talking about with you before the podcast that I was working on something and I was just banging my head into the wall. Like I cannot figure this thing out. And I was actually starting to doubt myself. And I was like, I got to call somebody. Like I almost called you because I needed some help. But in the end, I just kept pushing it. I kind of took a break for a second, walked away, thought about it, came back, boom, we worked through it. And I've had enough of those experiences that now when it comes to learning something new, I'm not fazed by it.
Yeah.
So I need to apply that same thing to other things in life. But I guess like that's the thing. If you are learning some new skill and you just kind of say like, well, failure is just part of this process. If you just accept that's part of it, you come into it aggressively positive, you're going to do well and you're going to learn super quickly. Anybody would. Like in general, human beings, we all come from different backgrounds, especially if you're doing something physical, you might have a leg up on somebody, but I'm convinced that with programming, anybody's capable.
Yeah. Oh, no, I am too. Absolutely.
Yeah. You just have to accept that failure piece. And also like we said earlier, just working through things like incrementally and not like trying to look at the whole bigger picture. That can be overwhelming. Yeah, with any skill. I mean, we were talking about like competitive shooting earlier. It's the same thing. If you try to, when you're sitting there looking at the target, if you're focused on every single piece of stimulus that exists, the wind and hand position, and if you just focus on everything, like it's going to be overwhelming. But if you kind of focus on one thing at a time, all right, I'm going to get good at pulling the trigger. I'm going to get good at where I'm holding it. Or in programming, you're working. I don't know.
It's harder to break that down.
It's harder to break. Well, you get the point. Like if you just if you do break down the problem, maybe not the technique, but if you break down the problem, you're gonna inevitably get through it.
Yeah.
And again, if you accept that failure, we shouldn't even call it failure. I'm not trying to be like a.
Well, yeah.
like I know there's some people that want to eliminate any piece of negativity in the world. Sometimes negative things help people grow, but like really it's odd to call it failure because like with any kind of engineering, nobody ever went into any engineering problem was just like didn't mess, nothing was
the
wrong.
only way that you fail, I forget where I heard this, but the only way that you fail is if you quit. And actually,
Yeah.
quitting might not even be bad because we used to say this when I was a student, like, DigiPen has like a pretty bad like dropout rate, or failure rate, right? And we used to kind of be negative. Oh, that person couldn't hack it or whatever, right? Like not literally hack, but it's kind of funny. But I changed my mind. Even when I was in school, I was like, it is hard. It is hard. Maybe not everybody wants to sit in front of the computer for 12 hours a day, and so that's not a big deal. They didn't die, right? So they're gonna move on and then hopefully do something that maybe they would enjoy more with their life, right? So I I don't think failure it has to be a negative word. Do you know what the name of our band was? Most Recent Failure.
I think you told me that before.
Yeah, maybe. And it was exactly that. Like we're always joking around. It's like just as a positive spin on that. Like don't worry, but this is the thing that we're like currently failing at or whatever. And it's like we just never cared because it is just learning.
I mean, yeah, you gotta work on something that you're excited about, like. And if you are, then there is no failure. Like if you're working on something that you're excited, like I love seeing a smile on Patrick's face or whatever when he realizes something. Like that's a good sign. I'm with you. Sometimes you have to know when to quit. That goes for a lot of things in life. Like if this isn't for you and you're just not there, like I wonder if Kevin maybe at some point is going to get to that point where he's just like, there's more positive things that I could be doing that bring me more fulfillment. Dude, rock on.
But he still has that skill. So I had this buddy who was in Korea. He like an American guy. He started out as an English teacher. He started this side business selling bingsu, which is like a shaved ice dessert.
Okay.
And he started out doing that. He bought like a shaved ice machine, and he was making it was like fusion style. So he'd have like kiwi strawberry or whatever flavors, which they don't always have in Korea. And that thing itself wasn't successful. That was actually one of the games. He hired me to make a game. You know that game?
Yeah.
That like Stompy Ruffers was like we made a bingsu catching game, and but that particular thing failed. But he kept going to so he stopped. Eventually, he stopped making the bingsu, but he kept the company, and he was like selling. I mean, it was just his company. He was like selling T-shirts, and that eventually led him to writing children's books because he like met enough people, and he started writing children's books, and then he was giving talks in Korea, not in Korean, but like Korea, like business for like foreigners over there, like the Westerners. And it just kept jumping, and he would happily jump from one thing to another. It's like, so that's also why like he didn't fail at making bingsu. That led him into making like writing books. Actually, and then he was always an English teacher, but he was doing these like he got his actual visa. Like for English teachers over there, they can only teach English. They're not allowed to have other jobs for like the visa that he got. But he ended up, because he studied Korean so hard, he got the next level up visa, so he actually quit his teaching job, and he was just doing it himself. He was doing just private lessons, and I knew a couple of people who were just doing private lessons because they had the correct visa. And then, like I said, he was like writing books, and I don't know what he's doing now. I haven't talked with him in a while, but like he didn't fail at any one thing. He kept jumping. And I think that's cool too.
Yeah, for sure. I worked on that like wedding app during when I was doing my wedding, and
you learned a bunch of Laravel.
Dude, I learned a ton from doing that. But I just realized at some point when it was time to quit, I didn't finish the project, despite me always telling people to finish projects, I didn't finish it. But I knew, and even looking back, it was a smart decision, and it was time to stop. It was like I'm hitting all these. I'm gonna eventually hit a dead end. It's not really helping me learn anything anymore. I've kind of like maxed what I'm going to learn from working on this thing. And it's also in an industry that's just super oversaturated. I was excited about it because I was in a wedding and I wanted to use it for mine. Or I was having my own wedding. But just in the end, it was just time to move on. And I got to work on some other projects. I think for a minute, I just focused more on work. And that was really positive. That was really good.
But me and you worked on that project together.
Mm-hmm.
and then now we do a podcast.
Yeah.
Jumping from one to another. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for this one we definitely both recognize that we're nowhere near time to quit this, and we may never.
Oh yeah. I'm having too much fun.
Yeah, it's a good time. So, yeah, I guess that's really it's a good positive episode. I like the sentiment. I know that we kind of went into this with the thought of like what was the skill versus talent. Yeah.
I like the other one though. I agree. I think two good pieces of advice: just start, and don't worry about the outcome.
Yeah.
Those are great pieces of advice.
Practice. Don't worry about the outcome. I got to get it down into like 2 or 3 words. Don't worry outcome. Don't worry about outcome. Something.
Yeah.
We'll come up with something. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's a very profound piece of advice, and I hope it's as profound for somebody else as just you saying it was for me. It's a really good thing. I think I'm going to apply that to a ton of other things that I really want to get good at, because I'm now recognizing that has a big impact on why I was able to find success in this industry, and no reason why that doesn't apply to other stuff too. So yeah, episode 24.
That's awesome.
That's super awesome. And we're not worried about failing still.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is we always do these in one take. You know what I mean? I know a lot of people, and at some point we may even go live with them. That would be pretty cool too.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Or at least do some, if it's not the podcast, do some kind of live episode.
Live streaming. Yeah.
You know, it happens. It's imperfect. We'll stutter. We'll get a phone call in the middle of it. We forget to put things on Do Not Disturb.
But I think that's so much better though. I think that's another skill related to communication. That's why I'm so excited to keep doing this. It is fun to talk about programming. I hope that I can help people, but I also know selfishly it's like good for us.
Yeah.
We're gonna meet people, right? You met Kevin last week.
Oh yeah. And we were supposed to talk a lot about that. We're supposed to talk about
that. We can talk about that next time.
Yeah, we'll talk about it next time. The thing is, we obviously just want to talk about. We've had so many people on at this point. Not so many, but we've had maybe like 6 or 7,
something like that. Yeah.
Something like that, and it's been really cool because we knew all of these people, and like just thinking about them, they're all programmers. We all kind of do the same job, but it's been really incredible having them all on and just realizing the differences between everybody and how they got to where they are.
How they all started, and the different paths that they're taking. Right now. Yeah.
So we'll talk about it more in another episode. But anyways, we'll keep focused on doing that. I know that that's the funner thing for us, and I hope that brings more value to people, being able to see where other people come from and how they got to where they're at. So anyways, that's episode 24. As always, check us out on social media and Discord. We hope to answer any questions that we can. And that wraps it up. We will see y'all next week for episode 25. Later, y'all.